Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I want to discuss with you Yu-Gi-Oh! Neuron. This is a companion app that's supposed to complement your Yu-Gi-Oh! Gameplay experience that was just released in Japan. Now, we don't have access to this yet here in the TCG unless you're like actually trying to go through like backdoor ways to get it, but I'm going to be showing you guys what this app looks like, some of the features it has, and kind of talk about what I like and dislike about this, and also discuss what potential this could have for the game moving forward. So I'm going to be using some footage from Beyond the Duel, an OCG oriented channel. Be sure to check them out. I'll have their link down in the description. I already got permission from him to use some of the footage that he had because it's kind of the best way to just show you guys how this app works instead of just really describing it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So this app doesn't really have a ton of features, but the features it does have are very interesting. The first one is a calculator. Now this may not be like too revolutionary, right? It's a calculator. So many people have already designed calculator-based apps for Yu-Gi-Oh! Before, so what makes this one any different? Well, we're going to get into that, but first I want to discuss what this app can do. So, as you can see on the screen right now, we have what looks to be just two players' life points. You can either increase or decrease them, obviously, because that's how life points work. You are able to tap on the whichever player is going to be gaining or losing life points. You input the value, and then it goes ahead and automatically computes what the new life point total is. If you see, there's actually a button that you can also go back in case you make an error in inputting the correct number of life points, which is nice. I don't think a lot of apps necessarily have that now. Another really cool feature of this, though, is the fact that there is a log that tracks life points. Now, the reason why this is important is because if you are playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In tournaments like Tier 2 or above events, you need to be taking paper life points so that there is a log to understand how the life points got to where they were, and that's typically why using calculators for life points is forbidden, because you aren't able to really like show the history of how the game progressed to get to a certain point. So if there's a discrepancy, it's kind of just a big headache, but this app includes the log and shows at each point what player lost life points and how they got to the life points that they are currently at. So that's really cool, and that's going to matter in a little bit when I discuss some of the future implications of this app. There's also a section for rolling dice or flipping a coin. This doesn't really matter too much because no one really uses Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards that roll dice or flip coins, especially at like the more competitive levels. Maybe you've got some people at locals who do that, so that could come in handy for them. I guess one thing you could argue is that if you're going to sit down and play against an opponent, instead of having to bring dice with you, this solves the problem, because since this is like a first-party Konami app, obviously you know it's not going to be like rigged in any way, so you could both just like touch it, obviously, you know, in a post-coronavirus world, but you could like touch it, both players roll, see who gets higher, and so it's just like one less thing you need to bring or not like need to remember if you're going to a tournament, because it'll be built into your phone, and I think that's pretty neat. And then there's also a section that includes counters. Now, not necessarily like spell counters or counters that you would like put on specific cards, but more so like a counter to keep track of certain effects that you've activated. So I think DSummon in the video talked about like, you know, back in like Dragon Ruler days, like when people are trying to remember like which Dragon Rulers they resolved, you could use this to keep track of which effects you've used. And you're currently allowed to do that now on paper. So this is just a digitized way that you're able to do that. And I think that's also a nice inclusion as well. But calculators aside, that's not why I wanted to discuss this. The reason I wanted to talk about this today is the deck builder. Now, deck builders aren't revolutionary either, right? I mean, obviously you can go on Dueling Book or YGO Pro, build a deck, and do pretty much whatever you want with it at that point. So this isn't a new concept, but this is a first-party deck builder that's integrated into their own software, and there's a lot of cool things they could do with that. So first and foremost, I want to discuss how this works and then how we can take that to the next level. So what you can do is you can simply just make any number of decks that you wish. I'm not sure if there's a limit on it yet. And what you're able to do is you can just make a new deck or edit a currently existing deck. You can search cards by their name and just drag them into the deck and essentially build a deck on your phone. I think that's pretty cool. Again, this already exists, but when you think about what we could actually do with this in terms of long-term implications, that's where this gets really exciting. One of the coolest parts about this entire deck builder is that you can actually use your phone's camera take a picture of physical cards and automatically import those cards into a deck. Now, this is something that once people saw it, they got really excited about, because this takes so much headache out of having to like manually import cards or like drag them into a list. You're able to just take pictures of them, and there you go, that's your deck. Now, unfortunately, this technology is still rather embryonic and isn't at the point where you can just take an entire picture of your deck and it's going to identify every card. I think over time this technology is going to get better, but you can even see that when DSummon is attempting to get any pictures of these cards, there's a percentage accuracy rate for how confident the system believes that the picture it took is the specific card it's trying to add to the deck. Now, obviously, when you factor in things like glare and all these other elements, it's going to throw it off to a degree, so obviously the circumstances have to be ideal, but it's still cool nonetheless. And I want you to think about this. Think about if we get to the point where you just take your phone, lay out your deck, because typically your deck is all laid out when you're trying to prepare it the day before a tournament. You can just take a picture of it, and then it automatically creates a list of cards for you to just generate. And then imagine just being able to take that and convert that into a deck list, which you can then submit to the tournament that you're going to enter. That would be phenomenal. But that brings me to the limitations of where I see Neuron in its current state. So one of the big downsides is that you can't take a picture of your entire deck right now. I think the most cards Neuron is able to recognize at once is 10, and even then that might be pushing it. I think like 7 to 8 is a much more accurate number of how often you're going to be able to do that. So yes, you could technically break your deck down into like several intervals of like 7 to 10 cards, but is that really going to expedite the process? Not necessarily. I mean, it's a lot quicker if your deck's already built on, like, say, something like Dueling Book. You can immediately just export it and you're already done. So we haven't gotten to the point where the process is completely streamlined, but this is first-party software, and I think we're going to get to that point. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And speaking of Dueling Book's export feature, that's another downside of this. DSummon was telling me that you aren't able to like take a deck that you've made and like export the file in a KDE deck list so that you could submit it for tournament play. That would just make the process so easy and convenient, because yeah, your deck is built on Neuron, but you still have to write the whole deck list down if you're going to go to a tournament, which is one of the main reasons why people build decks in online deck builders, is so that they can have everything laid out, see what they're working with, and instead of taking 10 to 20 minutes to write out their deck, they can just immediately export it, print it, or better yet, and this is where I'm going to go into my future implications of this app, imagine if we get to the point where the database of each tournament could essentially accept digital deck lists that are tied to your Konami ID. So what you could do is, and this is I think a perfect scenario if this were to happen, is your deck's all laid out the night before, you take a picture of the deck, it immediately recognizes all the cards, maybe you have to fix a card or two because of glare, but that's perfectly fine. It then immediately converts it into a registerable deck list, which you can then submit to the tournament that you're going to be attending. You can pay online, it's tied to your Konami ID, and then that's it. You can just walk into the tournament. There's no waiting in line. There's no having to get there an hour early to register because there's like 1,000 other people trying to do the same thing, and the process becomes seamless. Like, this is something that we should have had in this game like 4 years ago, and I'm excited that we're finally going to have something like this, but they need to do it correctly. If this isn't just a seamless process from being able to go from deck to tournament, or however they want to incorporate this into their tournament software, then it really isn't going to be changing too much. If it doesn't help make the process of signing up and registering for tournaments more efficient, then it's not really serving much purpose when you can just go to something like Dueling Book and do this already. And yeah, you still have to like print the deck list and everything, but at least that takes some of the headache out of it and makes it so that you're skipping some steps, where currently Neuron isn't really getting you much further than you would already be at if you were just doing things how we currently do them. Another long-term implication for this app, and I really hope this happens when this comes into the TCG, is that DSummon was telling me that as far as he's aware, you will be able to use this app in tier 2 or above tournament environments. And that is monumental if that's the case. Think about how much paper people waste when it comes to writing down life points all the time. Think about when people lose pens. Think about how just easier the whole process becomes if you can just throw out your phone and then you can just start taking life points. That way you have a log in case there's any discrepancies. It just makes everything so much easier and makes the experience that much better. Think about it in the long term as well. Let's say they incorporated that with the tournament software, that it's able to assign you your table number through the app so that you no longer have to scan a QR code, get your settings. It could notify you once your round is up, who your opponent is, what table you're sitting at. Then you can go to that table, play the match, you can report the results electronically, and then if you're able to report the match results electronically, it takes out work from the scorekeeper being able to have to wait to get all these sheets of paper from like the 1,000+ players that are competing at a certain event, and then it just makes the experience that much better for everyone. We've already done this to a degree at the Pro Play Tour, and the people who have come to any of the tournaments that I've commentated said they really do enjoy it when the app is working in its greatest state. But this is possible. The reason I wanted to make this video was not just to highlight the pros and the cons of this app or to criticize it, but mainly to discuss and emphasize the absolute game changer this app becomes if it's executed correctly. I think Yu-Gi-Oh! Neuron sets a very strong foundation for what the future of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Could look like, whether you're at the local level, regional level, etc. We could have statistics for the players built in if your Konami ID is tied to it. There is so many cool things they could do with this by having a first-party software built into it, and I'm really hoping that they do not take this for granted and really listen to the feedback of the player base to make this app the greatest that it can. Yes, I know we're under coronavirus, lockdown, and all of that, so we're not going to be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For quite some time, but this is the perfect opportunity to do it. By the time we do get back to any semblance of normality, then we'll be able to take advantage of this app for how cool it really is. They can have all the bugs worked out, and it's going to be Yu-Gi-Oh! Like we've never experienced it before. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic about this, but I just love when we can combine tech with something like a physical card game and see just what a beautiful combination it actually is. So guys, that's all I have to say about Yu-Gi-Oh! Neuron. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about this app. I'd really love to hear your thoughts, and please let me know down below what features you would love to see in an app like this. I already know Konami watches my videos, but I want them to see this one in particular because I want people to give their feedback to make this app the greatest it can possibly be. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content, and if you found this video informative, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. Just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.